Hello, my name is Jim Garrison, and I want to speak to all my fellow Americans about an issue that I think is of paramount importance as we start to think about the 2024 presidential election. In my mind, the most important person that has entered the arena for the presidency is Robert Kennedy Jr. I believe he's not only the best candidate, but I believe that he is probably the only person in America today that could capably govern and transform the political paralysis in the United States, as well as set U.S. foreign policy on a new basis internationally. We are in a situation of utmost urgent concern. Climate change is spinning out of control. The war in Ukraine is disrupting geostrategic balances. The US dollar is being radically eroded. US banks are teetering on the brink of insolvency. Our politics are in a perpetual state of paralysis and polarization. The Republicans have elevated the racism and sexism, xenophobia, and the hatred of Donald Trump into a pillar of their entire platform. The Democrats are anemic and indecisive. They've become a party of war. Their leadership is too old to capably govern. The U.S. Supreme Court is rife with corruption. More than at any time, certainly in my lifetime, we need a president with both vision, integrity, and the capacity to govern effectively. And that person is Robert Kennedy Jr. There are a number of considerations that I think are worth bearing in mind for why electing Bobby Kennedy Jr. to the presidency is so important for America. In the first instance, he comes from a family that we all know. The Kennedy family has been intertwined with and affecting US politics for several generations. And when one thinks of the administration beginning in 1960 to 1963 of President John Kennedy, when one thinks of Bobby Kennedy as his attorney general, one thinks of a benign moment, a moment of Camelot, a moment where the best and the brightest came into the White House and into the government with the sole purpose of transforming the institutions of America so that they could better serve not only the poor and the downtrodden, but elevate civil rights to its rightful place and transform international politics. So when one thinks of a Bobby Kennedy Jr. coming into the White House, we have a very good idea of what that would mean, what he would do, and what he would represent. And that is essentially to distill all the goodness that it means to be an American in the world right now. There's a deeper issue. The war in Ukraine has brought the world to the most dangerous moment, certainly since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Had it not been for the presence of mind, I would say the elegance of mind of John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy back then, the United States would have almost certainly gone to nuclear war had there been a lesser president in the White House, because that's what the Joint Chiefs of Staff were recommending. That's what many in Kennedy's own cabinet were recommending. Just imagine if we'd have done that. Europe now would still be a wasteland. But the Kennedy brothers discerned both the dangers and the opportunities and established a diplomatic relationship with Nikita Khrushchev, the General Secretary of the Soviet Union, such that the Russians stood down in Cuba and the Americans stood down in Turkey, and both withdrew their nuclear weapons. So we need somebody in the United States White House right now who we can rest assured in a situation fraught with nuclear dangers would keep his cool, would always look for a diplomatic solution, and would endeavor to the best of his ability to bring peace. And I believe that is Robert Kennedy Jr. If you think about the parallels between Bobby Kennedy Jr. today and his father, Bobby Kennedy in the 1960s, they're also very striking. When Bobby Kennedy ran for president in 1968, he ran against the sitting president, Lyndon Johnson, who had initiated a dramatic escalation of the war in Vietnam and then lied to the American people and lied to the world. And it was because of the urgency of peace in his time that Robert Kennedy ran for the presidency. Like John, his brother, his life was cut short. I personally had the privilege of meeting him and shaking his hand a week before he was killed in June 6th, 1968. I was in San Jose, California. His son now is running against a sitting president, Joe Biden, who, like Lyndon Johnson, has dramatically escalated war, this time in Europe, and has lied to the American people and has lied to the world about the reality of what's going on. There hasn't been this level of warmongering in the Oval Office since the presidency of George Bush Jr. in the early 2000s. So Robert Kennedy Jr. is running against the sitting president. He's questioning the policies of Ukraine now, as his father did, challenged the policies around Vietnam 60 years ago. And he is making the right discernment and judgments, saying that if he was president, he would immediately seek peace, just like his uncle did. There is no reason for us to be escalating the war in Ukraine and risking nuclear confrontation between the superpowers. It's madness now as it was madness then. And Robert Kennedy Jr. is standing up and making his voice heard. And more broadly, like his father and like his uncle, he's not only a man of peace, but he's a man of integrity. If you look at the career of Bobby Kennedy Jr. as a lawyer, he's filed hundreds of lawsuits against major corporations like Monsanto, even the US government, challenging their degradation of the environment and working tirelessly to make sure that the water systems are pure and that the environment is restored and that civil rights and civil justice are transacted everywhere in the United States. The 2024 election is going to be crucial. And it is important that all Americans understand that we may have one more election to really make a difference in how the future is going to turn out. Bobby Kennedy Jr. has been speaking truth to power all his adult life. If he was given power, which the White House provides, I am confident that he would govern based on the truths that he has defended and articulated for decades. This is his moment. This is the moment for America at a time of crisis and dire need, where everything in America needs radical transformation, to bring in someone who we know, before he would even start his presidency, would bring in all the values and the traditions and the legacy that this country requires to take its rightful place as a democratic nation at peace with the world. Bobby Kennedy Jr. for president in 2024.